We're going on a journey through the fascinating world of psychological therapy. We're going to look at 5 totally different approaches, from changing our brain chemistry to just learning how to live in the moment to see all the unique ways we can work towards well-being.
If you've ever looked into getting help, you've probably seen this huge menu of options: CBD, dream analysis, drug therapy. It can be a lot, and it really makes you wonder, why isn't there just one single perfect therapy that works for everybody?
Well, the answer is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. It's because every school of thought, every approach, points to a different root cause for why we feel and act the way we do. And of course, if you think the cause is different, the tool you use to fix it is going to be different too.
So here's the game plan for today. We're going to kick things off with the brain itself and drug therapy. Then, we'll dive deep into the unconscious with dream analysis. After that, we'll look at how we can actually unlearn our fears with something called systematic desensitization, then challenge our thoughts with CBT, and we'll wrap it all up by finding a little peace with mindfulness.
Okay, first stop is the biological approach. Now, this way of thinking sees psychological issues not as some kind of personal failing, but as a physical illness. Yeah, just like diabetes or heart disease, something rooted directly in our body's hardware.
The logic here is pretty straightforward. If the problem is seen as chemical, say an imbalance with neurotransmitters like dopamine, then the most direct solution is, you guessed it, also chemical. Drug therapy is all about trying to rebalance those internal systems. And this kind of therapy has really evolved over time. The first antipsychotics back in the 50s, they were kind of like a sledgehammer, just blocking dopamine receptors really intensely. But by the 90s, the next generation of drugs was way more like a scalpel. They bind more gently and to fewer receptors, which meant you could get similar benefits with way fewer severe side effects.
And the impact was huge. A really important study back in 1964 found that a whopping 75% of patients with schizophrenia showed major improvement on these drugs. Compare that to only 25% on a placebo. But, and this is a big but, there was a serious trade-off. Those early drugs could cause some pretty awful side effects, like a movement disorder called tardive dyskinesia. And that's exactly why the evolution to more precise drugs was so important.
Okay, now let's do a complete 180. We're shifting away from brain chemistry and diving into the deep, hidden world of the unconscious mind. This is the territory of the psychodynamic approach, which you probably associate with its pioneer, Sigmund Freud.
So this approach basically sees our dreams as a secret window into our unconscious. The part you actually remember when you wake up, the manifest content, that's just the coded story. The real treasure is the latent content, the hidden, symbolic meaning underneath it all. The whole point of dream analysis is to translate that surface story back into the powerful, unconscious wishes it's really about. And a lot of therapists find it super useful. One study found that therapists reported over 70% of their clients benefited from this kind of work. But it's a delicate business. A really powerful interpretation, even if it's meant to help, could actually make someone feel much worse. It's a fine line to walk.
All right, time for another pivot. We're moving out of the hidden world of the unconscious and into stuff we can actually see and measure: our behavior. The behaviorist approach has a really cool idea. If our fears are learned, well, then they can be unlearned.
The key here is a process called counter-conditioning, and it's based on a really simple but brilliant fact about our bodies. You physically cannot be deeply relaxed and totally terrified at the exact same time. The two feelings just don't mix. So the goal is to teach your body to associate that thing you're afraid of with calm instead of panic.
It's a really structured process. First, you learn how to get into a state of deep relaxation. Then, you and your therapist build what's called a fear hierarchy. Basically, a ladder of your fears, from the least scary thing at the bottom to the most terrifying at the top. Finally, while you're super relaxed, you start at that bottom rung and you only move up the ladder when you can face that step without any anxiety at all.
So, if you're afraid of spiders, you're not going to start with one crawling on you. No way. You start with something as simple as just thinking about a spider. And you know what? The data shows this slow and steady approach really works. Research found it was successful for about 75% of people with phobias.
Okay, so we've looked at our biology and our behaviors. Now let's talk about that little voice inside our heads, our internal monologue. This is the world of the cognitive approach and its most famous therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Here's the big idea. It's not actually an event that causes our feelings. It's our interpretation of that event, the story we tell ourselves about it. CBT works from the idea that our distress often comes from these negative, distorted thought patterns. And the amazing part is, it empowers you to spot those patterns and challenge them. You essentially become your own therapist.
And it gives you a really practical set of tools to do it. You might keep a thought diary to see the connections between your thoughts and feelings. You get homework to practice these new skills in real life. It's all very focused on what's happening now and what your goals are. It's a real team effort between you and the therapist.
And how well does it work? Well, the numbers are pretty staggering. A major study on depression found that after 36 weeks, an incredible 81% of the group in CBT had significantly improved. Now, it's a really powerful tool, but it's important to note that because the work is so intense and self-reflective, it can sometimes cause some temporary distress.
All right, for our final stop, we're shifting gears completely. We're landing on the positive approach. What's cool about this one is that, unlike some of the others that focus on fixing what's wrong, this is all about cultivating what's right, building up our well-being and happiness.
And at the very heart of this approach is mindfulness. Now, the goal here isn't to empty your mind. Let's be real, that's almost impossible. The goal is to change your relationship with your mind. It's about learning to just notice your thoughts and feelings without judging them, letting them float by like leaves on a stream instead of getting pulled in by the current.
And here's a classic grounding technique you can literally do right now. By tuning into your 5 senses, you pull your brain out of worrying about the past or stressing about the future, and you anchor it right here in the present. And it has real measurable effects. One study found that 65% of cancer patients who used mindfulness techniques reported a big improvement in their mood.
So, we've gone from drugs that rebalance our brains to practices that ground us in the present moment. We've seen there isn't one single cause, so there can't be one single cure. Every therapy gives us a different lens and a different set of tools. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. Maybe the future of mental health care isn't about finding the one best therapy, but about getting really good at matching the right approach to the right person at exactly the right time.